The most dangerous prison is the one nobody remembers you are inside. Naomi Brooks tightened the strings of her plain black apron as she hurried through the gleaming kitchen of Whitmore House, one of Chicago's most exclusive fine dining restaurants. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the dining room beyond the swinging doors while polished silver trays reflected the warm evening lights, creating an atmosphere of effortless luxury for wealthy guests who would never notice the quiet employees working behind the scenes. Naomi preferred it that way. She was naturally shy, speaking only when necessary, and moving carefully through every task with patient precision. She had spent years believing that if she worked hard enough and stayed invisible enough, trouble would simply pass her by. Tonight proved how wrong that belief could be. During the busiest dinner service of the week, another employee hurried around a corner carrying an overloaded tray. Naomi instinctively stepped aside to avoid a collision, but her shoulder brushed a rolling cart filled with carefully prepared dessert plates. One porcelain dish slipped free, landing harmlessly on a rubber floor mat before breaking into several pieces. The kitchen suddenly fell silent. Every cook looked toward the sound. Restaurant manager Olivia Parker marched across the room, her polished heels striking the tile with sharp confidence. She glanced at the broken plate, then at Naomi, her expression filled with disappointment rather than understanding. "Do you realize how much that presentation was worth?" she asked coldly. Naomi immediately lowered her eyes. "I am so sorry. It was an accident. I will pay for the replacement if I have to." Olivia folded her arms. "You cannot replace lost reputation during dinner service." Several employees looked uncomfortable, yet none interrupted. They had all seen Olivia's temper before, and most had learned that silence was safer than disagreement. Olivia pointed toward the large walk-in freezer near the back hallway. "Go inside for a few minutes and think about being more careful. Perhaps the cold will help you remember." Naomi hesitated only briefly before obeying. She had no desire to argue. Carrying quiet embarrassment heavier than the winter coat hanging beside the freezer entrance, she stepped inside. The massive steel door closed behind her with a heavy click that echoed through the frozen room. Shelves lined with carefully labeled ingredients surrounded her, while soft refrigeration fans hummed overhead. At first she assumed someone would reopen the door almost immediately. She even managed a nervous smile, believing the punishment was nothing more than an unpleasant joke. She reached for the handle. It did not move. She tried again with both hands. Nothing. Her breathing became quicker, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Someone is out there," she whispered to herself. "They just forgot." Minutes passed. Beyond the thick insulated walls, the restaurant continued serving elegant meals, pouring expensive wine, and celebrating birthdays completely unaware that one quiet employee remained alone behind a locked steel door. Naomi reached into her apron pocket and found her phone. The battery icon flashed red. 2% remained. Her hands trembled as she searched through old contacts without fully focusing on the screen. In growing panic, she tapped one unfamiliar number she barely remembered saving months earlier. The call connected almost instantly. A calm male voice answered. "Hello." Naomi closed her eyes with relief. "Please, I think they forgot I am in here." Before she could say another word, the screen went dark. The battery had died. Hundreds of feet away in another part of Chicago, the man slowly lowered his phone, looked once at the unknown number that had suddenly gone silent, and without saying a single word, quietly stood up from the meeting that everyone else believed was far more important. The silent freezer seemed to grow smaller with every passing minute. Naomi wrapped her arms tightly around herself, taking slow, careful breaths as she leaned against the insulated wall, refusing to let panic overwhelm her. She had spent most of her life solving problems quietly, believing that patience usually found a way through difficult moments. She told herself someone would eventually remember where she was. The restaurant was busy, the staff distracted, and perhaps Olivia had simply forgotten her cruel lesson had gone too far. Outside the thick steel door, elegant laughter drifted faintly through layers of insulated walls, barely audible beneath the steady hum of refrigeration fans. Crystal glasses clinked together while expensive dinners continued uninterrupted. Inside the freezer, time seemed to move differently. Naomi glanced at her dark phone screen, knowing the battery was completely gone. The single call she had managed to place now felt almost unreal. She could only hope the stranger on the other end had understood enough to realize something was wrong. Hundreds of feet away across downtown Chicago, the unknown man remained standing beside a polished conference table while half a dozen executives watched him in confused silence. Their presentation filled an enormous digital display, but he no longer looked at quarterly reports or investment charts. His attention rested entirely on the unfamiliar phone number that had disappeared moments after one frightened sentence. "Please, I think they forgot I am in here." He replayed those words in his mind with remarkable clarity. The voice had not sounded dramatic. It had sounded sincere, calm, but frightened enough to ask a complete stranger for help. He pressed one button on his phone. "Trace the last incoming call," he said quietly. No one questioned the instruction. His chief of security answered immediately. "Yes, sir." Within seconds, laptops opened, phones began ringing, and experienced investigators quietly redirected their attention away from corporate business toward identifying the source of one unanswered mystery. Back inside Whitmore House, dinner service continued at full speed. Olivia Parker walked confidently through the dining room, greeting influential guests with polished professionalism, smiling as though nothing unusual had happened. The broken dessert plate had already been replaced. New orders flowed into the kitchen. Employees rushed between stations carrying perfectly arranged meals. Yet one young dishwasher paused while organizing clean trays. He looked toward the hallway leading to the walk-in freezer, his forehead tightening slightly. "Has anyone seen Naomi?" he asked another employee. The line cook barely looked up. "She is probably cleaning the storage room." The answer sounded reasonable enough for everyone to continue working. Minutes stretched into nearly half an hour. Naomi gently rubbed her hands together, refusing to waste energy pulling on the locked handle again. Instead, she quietly whispered encouraging words to herself, remembering advice her late grandmother often repeated whenever life became difficult. "Fear grows louder when hope grows quiet." Naomi closed her eyes and repeated the sentence again. Somewhere beyond the restaurant walls, headlights from several black sport utility vehicles reflected across rain-soaked Chicago streets as they moved steadily through evening traffic. None of the drivers used flashing lights or loud sirens. They simply followed precise directions received only moments earlier. Inside the lead vehicle, a composed Korean man looked once more at the silent phone number displayed on his screen before calmly giving a single instruction. "Find her before she believes no one is coming." The convoy moved through downtown Chicago with quiet precision, blending into the evening traffic so naturally that no passing driver would have guessed anything unusual was unfolding. Inside the lead sport utility vehicle, Daniel Kong sat silently beside the window, his attention fixed not on the city lights, but on the unanswered phone number still glowing on his screen. He had listened to thousands of conversations throughout his career, negotiating complex business deals, and making difficult decisions that affected countless lives. Yet none of those voices lingered in his memory the way this one did. The young woman had not begged. She had not exaggerated. She had simply sounded forgotten. That single realization unsettled him more than any emergency ever had. "Location confirmed," his chief of security announced from the front seat. The call originated from Whitmore House Restaurant. Daniel gave a small nod. "Any indication she called someone else?" "No, sir. The phone battery died immediately afterward." Daniel looked out at the passing skyline. Then she believed that stranger was her only chance. His words settled heavily inside the vehicle. No one replied. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant freezer, Naomi slowly slid down against the insulated wall until she was seated on the clean concrete floor. She folded her hands together, partly to stay warm and partly to keep them from trembling. Closing her eyes, she allowed happier memories to replace the silence surrounding her. She remembered helping her younger brother practice for his college scholarship interview in their tiny apartment. She remembered making pancakes for him every Sunday morning because it was the one breakfast that always made him smile. She remembered promising their late grandmother that no matter how difficult life became, she would never allow bitterness to change her heart. Those memories reminded her why she continued working 3 different jobs without complaint. Every exhausting day carried someone else's future inside it. Somewhere beyond the heavy steel door, the restaurant remained completely unaware of the quiet battle taking place only a few yards away. Guests complimented perfectly prepared meals while a pianist performed soft jazz near the dining room fireplace. Waiters carried elegant desserts beneath sparkling chandeliers. Olivia Parker accepted compliments from satisfied customers with polished confidence, believing another successful evening was unfolding exactly as planned. Yet subtle cracks had already begun to appear. The young dishwasher glanced once again toward the hallway leading to the storage area. "I still have not seen Naomi," he murmured. This time the assistant chef frowned. "She was supposed to finish cleaning the preparation station 20 minutes ago." An uneasy silence passed between them before both returned reluctantly to their work, convincing themselves there must be a simple explanation. Several miles away, Daniel's convoy turned onto the final street leading toward Whitmore House. Rain reflected across the pavement beneath the restaurant's glowing entrance sign as the vehicles slowed to a smooth stop. Daniel stepped onto the sidewalk with the same composed expression he carried into every room, neither hurried nor dramatic. Employees standing near the entrance instinctively straightened as though recognizing a presence they could not immediately explain. Daniel looked once at the elegant building before quietly asking his chief of security a single question. "How long has she been inside?" The answer came after only a brief pause. "Approximately 38 minutes, sir." Daniel's expression did not change, but every member of his security team understood from the silence that followed that whatever happened next would begin not with accusations, but with the truth. Daniel entered Whitmore House without attracting unnecessary attention. He did not announce his name, and he did not expect anyone to recognize him. His charcoal suit blended naturally with the restaurant's upscale atmosphere. Yet there was something about the quiet confidence in his posture that caused conversations near the entrance to soften. The hostess greeted him with a professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Do you have a reservation?" Daniel answered politely. "Not tonight. I only need to speak with your manager." Within moments, Olivia Parker approached, still wearing the composed expression that had impressed countless guests throughout the evening. "Welcome to Whitmore House," she said pleasantly. "How may I assist you?" Daniel looked at her calmly. "I received a phone call from inside this building approximately 40 minutes ago." Olivia hesitated for only a fraction of a second before smiling again. "I am afraid I do not understand." Daniel continued in the same even tone. A young woman believed she had been forgotten. "I would like to know where she is." Olivia forced a quiet laugh. "Perhaps someone dialed the wrong number. We have had a very busy dinner service." Daniel studied her expression without speaking. Years of experience had taught him that silence often revealed more than questions ever could. Beside him, his chief of security quietly approached the front desk. "Would you please preserve all security footage from the last hour?" he asked with courteous professionalism. The request immediately changed the atmosphere. Several employees exchanged uncertain glances. Olivia's smile became noticeably less relaxed. "May I ask why that would be necessary?" Daniel answered before anyone else could respond. "Because the truth deserves an accurate memory." Those simple words settled over the lobby like unexpected snowfall. The assistant chef, Ethan Miller, happened to walk through the hallway carrying fresh ingredients when he overheard the conversation. His expression suddenly changed. "Naomi," he whispered almost to himself. Daniel heard the name immediately. "Who is Naomi?" Ethan looked toward Olivia before answering. She was sent to organize the freezer after a plate was broken." Olivia quickly interrupted. "She is probably finishing inventory." Ethan frowned. No, she was not doing inventory. The uneasy feeling that had followed him all evening suddenly became impossible to ignore. "I have not seen her since before dinner service started." Daniel turned toward the hallway leading to the kitchen. "Please show me." Olivia stepped forward instinctively. "That area is restricted to staff." Daniel met her eyes with complete composure. "Then let us become staff for the next few minutes." No anger appeared in his voice, yet no one questioned the request. Ethan immediately led the way through the spotless kitchen. Cooks gradually slowed their work as the unusual group passed between stainless steel counters and glowing preparation stations. The farther they walked, the quieter the room became. Finally, they reached the heavy steel freezer door at the end of the service corridor. Ethan stopped, looking uncertain. I never checked." Daniel rested one hand gently on the large metal handle before looking at Ethan. "Open it." The young chef swallowed hard and slowly pulled the door outward. A wave of icy air drifted into the hallway. Sitting quietly against the far wall, still wrapped in her thin housekeeping apron, Naomi slowly lifted her head toward the light, completely unaware that the stranger whose voice she had heard on the phone was now standing only a few feet away. Naomi blinked several times as warm air slowly replaced the bitter chill surrounding her. For a brief moment she believed. She was imagining the open doorway and the circle of worried faces staring back at her. Ethan immediately rushed forward and offered his hand. "Naomi, are you all right?" She accepted his help with a faint smile that revealed more exhaustion than fear. "I think so," she answered softly. "I was waiting because I thought someone would remember." Her words landed with unexpected weight. No accusation, no anger, only quiet honesty. Daniel remained where he was, giving her space instead of overwhelming her with questions. He noticed the way she instinctively thanked Ethan before taking a careful step out of the freezer, even after everything that had happened. She did not complain. She did not point fingers. She simply looked around the kitchen as though worried she had somehow interrupted everyone else's evening. Olivia quickly stepped forward, forcing a reassuring smile. "This was clearly a misunderstanding. We became extremely busy during dinner service, and unfortunately, she was overlooked." Daniel turned toward her without raising his voice. Misunderstandings last a few minutes. This lasted long enough for someone to believe no one was coming. The kitchen fell silent again. Every employee suddenly became aware that this conversation had moved beyond ordinary workplace tension. Daniel looked at Naomi. "Were you placed inside voluntarily?" Naomi hesitated. She glanced briefly toward Olivia before lowering her eyes. "I was told to stay there for a little while because of the broken plate." Daniel nodded once. "Were you told the door would remain unlocked?" Naomi thought carefully before answering. "No. I assumed someone would open it soon." Daniel thanked her with a respectful nod, saying nothing further. He did not press for more details because he could already see enough. His chief of security quietly approached with a tablet. "Sir, the security recordings have been secured." Daniel accepted the device and calmly reviewed the footage beginning several minutes before the accident. The video showed Naomi stepping aside to avoid another employee before the dessert plate slipped from the cart. It showed her apologizing immediately. It showed Olivia directing her toward the freezer while several staff members watched uncertainly. Most importantly, it showed no one returning after the heavy door closed behind her. Daniel continued watching in complete silence. No one dared interrupt. Every passing second seemed louder than the last. Finally, he handed the tablet back. "Please preserve multiple copies," he said calmly. "Nothing should be deleted." Olivia's confidence visibly faded. "I assure you we can resolve this internally." Daniel met her eyes with the same composed expression he had worn since entering the building. Truth does not become smaller because it stays inside a building. Several employees quietly lowered their heads. Ethan looked toward Naomi with unmistakable regret. "I should have checked sooner," he admitted. Naomi offered him a gentle smile. "You did check. You came back." Daniel noticed that response more than anything else. Even after being forgotten, she chose gratitude instead of resentment. That single choice told him far more about her character than any resume ever could. He turned once more toward his security chief. "Please ask the restaurant owner to join us." His voice remained perfectly calm, yet everyone standing in that kitchen understood that the evening was no longer about one broken plate. It had become about the value of a person that too many people had failed to see until someone from outside reminded them to look. Restaurant owner Charles Whitmore arrived only minutes later, still wearing the confident smile of a businessman who believed he had been summoned to greet an important guest. The smile disappeared the moment he noticed the frozen expressions of his kitchen staff, the security team standing quietly nearby, and Naomi wrapped in a thick restaurant blanket while sipping a cup of warm tea one of the servers had hurriedly prepared for her. Charles looked toward Olivia with visible confusion. What happened here? Before she could answer, Daniel stepped forward with calm courtesy. "I appreciate you coming so quickly. There is something I believe you should see before anyone explains it." His chief of security handed Charles the tablet containing the preserved surveillance footage. The owner watched every minute in complete silence. He saw the accidental collision. He saw Naomi apologize immediately. He saw Olivia direct her toward the freezer. He watched the heavy door close. Then he watched the kitchen continue operating while the clock quietly advanced. No employee intentionally checked the freezer. No manager returned. No one remembered. When the recording ended, Charles lowered the tablet very slowly. The kitchen remained completely silent. "Is this recording authentic?" he finally asked. "It has already been duplicated and preserved," Daniel answered evenly. "Nothing has been altered." Charles closed his eyes for a brief moment before looking toward Naomi. "Miss Brooks, I owe you an apology." Naomi immediately shook her head with gentle humility. "Sir, I do not want anyone to lose their job because of me." Several employees looked at her in disbelief. Even now, after everything she had experienced, her first concern was for other people. Daniel noticed the reaction around the room. Compassion often revealed itself most clearly when someone had every reason to choose resentment instead. Charles turned toward Olivia. "Did you personally instruct her to enter that freezer?" Olivia hesitated before answering quietly. "Yes, I expected it to be only a few minutes." "And did you personally confirm she came back out?" She lowered her eyes. "No." Another long silence followed. Daniel did not interrupt. He had no interest in humiliating anyone. The facts were already speaking for themselves. Charles took a slow breath before addressing everyone in the kitchen. Leadership is not measured by authority. It is measured by responsibility. Tonight, responsibility failed. His words echoed through the room with quiet sincerity. Olivia looked toward Naomi, her confidence replaced by genuine regret. "I allowed pressure to become more important than people," she admitted softly. "I should never have treated you that way. I am truly sorry." Naomi looked at her for several seconds before giving a small nod. "Thank you for saying that." There was no bitterness in her voice, only relief that the truth had finally been acknowledged. Daniel watched the exchange carefully. Forgiveness offered freely carried a strength that power alone could never create. Charles then faced his employees once more. Effective immediately, every workplace safety procedure will be reviewed, every supervisor will receive additional training, and no employee will ever be isolated as punishment again. Respect will become part of this restaurant's standard, not simply its service. No one objected. No one looked away. The elegant dining room beyond the kitchen continued glowing beneath crystal chandeliers, but inside that quiet workspace, something far more valuable had begun to change. Daniel glanced once at Naomi, who still seemed surprised that so many people were suddenly listening to her. And in that silent moment, he realized the call she believed had reached the wrong person had instead reached exactly the one person who refused to let her dignity remain locked behind a forgotten door. The kitchen gradually returned to motion, but nothing felt the same. Every employee carried out familiar routines with quieter hands and more thoughtful eyes, as though they had all witnessed something impossible to ignore. Charles Whitmore asked several managers to escort the remaining dinner service to a smooth conclusion while he remained behind with Daniel, Naomi, and a small group of senior staff. The atmosphere no longer felt tense. It felt reflective. Daniel accepted a cup of black coffee, but barely touched it. Instead, he watched Naomi thank the young server who had brought her another blanket. She smiled with genuine appreciation over such a simple kindness, never acting as though the room owed her anything. Charles noticed the same thing. "Miss Brooks," he said gently, "you have shown more grace tonight than many leaders show in an entire career." Naomi looked embarrassed by the compliment. "I only wanted everyone to be safe," she answered quietly. "People make mistakes. I just hoped mine would not become someone else's burden." Daniel looked at her with quiet curiosity. "Even now, you are worried about protecting other people." Naomi gave a small shrug. "My grandmother always believed that difficult days reveal who we really are. I have tried not to forget that." Those words lingered in the room long after she finished speaking. Daniel lowered his coffee cup without taking a sip. Something about her calm sincerity awakened a distant memory he had not revisited in years. He remembered an elderly woman sitting beside a hospital window after surviving a frightening medical emergency several months earlier. She had spoken about a young woman who stayed with her until the ambulance arrived, refusing any reward before quietly disappearing into the crowd. His adoptive mother had repeated that story many times afterward, saying the stranger had reminded her that genuine kindness still existed in the world. Daniel had asked his security office to identify the young woman so his family could thank her properly. After several weeks, they located only a first name and a phone number written on the ambulance report. He had saved the number, hoping one day their paths might cross naturally. Looking at Naomi now, the memory became impossible to ignore. He reached into his jacket and opened the contacts stored in his phone. The same number appeared on the screen. He slowly lifted his eyes toward her. "Miss Brooks," he said softly, "have we ever met before?" Naomi looked puzzled. "I do not believe so, sir." Daniel smiled faintly. "Perhaps not. But I think someone very important to me already has." Naomi searched her memory but could not understand what he meant. She had helped many strangers over the years whenever she could, never asking names or expecting to see them again. For her, kindness had never been an investment. It was simply the right thing to do. Daniel quietly closed his phone. He decided not to explain everything just yet. Instead, he wanted to be completely certain before revealing a connection that could change the entire evening. Charles observed the exchange with growing curiosity, sensing there was another story unfolding beneath the one everyone had already witnessed. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, and moonlight reflected across the restaurant windows. Inside, every person standing in that kitchen believed the hardest part of the night was over. None of them realized that the forgotten phone call had never been the greatest coincidence of the evening, because the quiet woman they had almost overlooked had already changed Daniel Kang's family long before she ever heard his voice. Daniel slowly placed his phone on the stainless steel counter and looked at Naomi with a quiet expression that carried more gratitude than authority. "Several months ago," he began, "my adoptive mother collapsed while walking through Grant Park after a charity event. Hundreds of people passed by. Most were in a hurry. One young woman stayed with her until the ambulance arrived." Naomi listened politely, still unaware where the story was leading. Daniel continued, "My mother said the young woman held her hand, kept her calm, and refused every offer of money before disappearing." Naomi's eyes softened as an old memory slowly returned. "There was an elderly woman," she said carefully. "She looked frightened, so I stayed until the paramedics arrived. I did not know her name." Daniel gave a gentle nod. "Her name is Grace Kong. She is my mother." The kitchen became completely silent once again. Charles Whitmore looked from Daniel to Naomi in astonishment. Ethan lowered his head, realizing that the quiet woman everyone had overlooked had unknowingly touched the life of the man now standing before them long before this evening began. Naomi blinked in disbelief. "I never knew who she was," she whispered. "She kept asking how she could thank me, but I told her she did not owe me anything." Daniel smiled faintly. "She insisted on giving you her son's phone number before the ambulance left. She told me afterward that you accepted it only because you did not want to disappoint her." Naomi suddenly remembered folding a small card into her purse that afternoon before later saving the number into her phone without thinking much about it. Life had become busy again almost immediately. She never called. She never expected to. "When my phone battery was almost gone tonight," she said quietly, "I could barely see the screen. I thought I was calling one of my coworkers." Daniel nodded. "Instead, you reached the only number my mother hoped you would never need." A gentle silence settled across the room. No one spoke because there was nothing left to explain. The coincidence no longer felt like chance. It felt like two acts of kindness finding each other across time. Daniel reached into his jacket and removed a small silver business card holder. He handed Naomi a single card, not as a symbol of power, but as an invitation built on respect. "My mother still talks about the woman who reminded her that compassion exists without expectation," he said. "She has often wished she could thank you properly. If you are willing, I would like to introduce you to her." Naomi looked at the card before lifting her eyes. "I do not know what to say," Daniel answered with complete sincerity. "You do not have to say anything. You already did something that changed our family months ago. Tonight simply gave me the opportunity to return the kindness." Charles smiled warmly. "Miss Brooks, sometimes the greatest measure of character is not found in what people know about us, but in what we choose to do when nobody knows our name." Naomi carefully accepted the card, still overwhelmed by everything that had unfolded. She had believed one accidental phone call had interrupted a stranger's evening. She now realized it had quietly completed a promise made months earlier beside an ambulance, when one ordinary act of compassion had planted a seed that destiny patiently waited to bring back into bloom. 3 weeks later, the first light of a quiet Saturday morning filtered through the tall windows of the Kong family estate as Naomi stood in the peaceful garden beside Grace Kong, helping her arrange fresh flowers for breakfast. Their conversations had become effortless, filled with stories about family, hope, and the ordinary moments that often mattered most. Naomi had accepted Daniel's invitation, not because she was searching for a better position, but because Grace insisted that kindness deserved the chance to become friendship. Caring for Grace never felt like a job. It felt like honoring someone who reminded her of her own grandmother. Daniel often watched their morning routines from a respectful distance, grateful that his mother laughed more than she had in years. He never mentioned the freezer again because he believed people should not be defined forever by the worst moment they had survived. Instead, he quietly focused on creating opportunities worthy of Naomi's character. Back at Whitmore House, meaningful changes continued to reshape the restaurant. Charles Whitmore introduced new employee protection policies, expanded leadership training, and encouraged every manager to lead with accountability instead of fear. Olivia Parker accepted responsibility for her decisions and chose to rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. She personally apologized to every member of the staff, acknowledging that authority without compassion had nearly cost someone far more than a career. The atmosphere inside the restaurant slowly transformed. Employees spoke more openly, supervisors listened more carefully, and small acts of respect became part of everyday life. Ethan often remembered the night everything changed, reminding new employees that no task was ever more important than making sure every coworker returned home safely. One afternoon, Daniel received a handwritten letter from Charles thanking him for insisting on truth instead of humiliation. Daniel placed the letter inside a desk drawer without responding publicly. Recognition had never been his goal. Protecting someone's dignity had been enough. Several days later, Grace invited Naomi to join the family for Sunday dinner. As they gathered around the table, Grace reached across and gently held Naomi's hand. "Months ago, you stayed beside a frightened stranger because you believed every life deserved compassion," she said with a warm smile. "You did not know that stranger would someday become family in all the ways that truly matter." Naomi felt tears gather in her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. She looked around the table and realized that the phone call she believed had reached the wrong person had quietly led her exactly where she was meant to be. Daniel lifted his glass of sparkling water with a gentle smile. "People often believe destiny arrives with loud announcements," he said. "Sometimes it arrives through one small decision to help another person when nobody is watching." The room fell peacefully silent as everyone reflected on those words. Outside, the evening sun painted the Chicago skyline with shades of gold, while inside the warmth of genuine respect filled every corner of the home. Naomi had entered that difficult night believing she had been forgotten. She left it knowing that compassion never disappears, even when the world seems too busy to notice it. Kindness has a remarkable way of finding its way back, often through people we never expected to meet. And on that unforgettable journey, everyone who witnessed her quiet courage discovered something far more valuable than power or success. They remembered what dignity truly looks like.